Let's get into it. Coach Colin here. What's going on, guys? This is wild. Now, somebody took the time to zoom in on a video that I already did. Multiple people have. But the timeline. You know how I was talking about this being this wild timeline, and it really structures out exactly what was happening to Charlie, from July 1st up until September 10th, right? Now, the timeline has just got a little crazier. This is the missing piece of the timeline that I'm about to show you right now. Shout out to, what is this lady's name? It says Nikki Rosie, 1973. Shout out to her for actually zooming in and finding something that really speaks volumes here. It adds so much more to the timeline. Listen to this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the proof of what she's talking about. Then we're going to go back to Baron Coleman, the man who was responsible for figuring out the Google searches and how wild they all seemed. I'm going to go back to his timeline of things and match it with my timeline of things in regards to where Charlie was speaking, the backlash that he would receive, and all of it makes way more sense now. Listen to this.
News Utah investigates. We now know the exact date and time that the request was submitted to UVU to hold the September 10th event. Now, I took a screenshot of this and zoomed in. I'm going to show you a second. And it clearly shows July 18th, 2025 at 10:08 a.m. is when it was submitted. I think this would be significant to that Barron guy. Coleman, I think was his last name, the one that did all the Google searches and discovered all that crazy crap that started getting searched on July 20th. When this was submitted for approval on July 18th. Might mean something. Up at the very top, submitted by, they redacted the name, on July 18th, 2025, 10:08 a.m. See on hold down there too? So it was on hold for probably 2 days. Probably got approved on the 20th, if not immediately. I'm just going to throw it out there that I think it would be greatly appreciated if everybody went over to YouTube and looked up Fox 13 News Utah and gave them a like.
Yeah, I agree with that. They seem to be the only ones in terms of, I said this before, in the mainstream sphere of things, that is actually asking questions, requesting documents, and actually got an answer. Nobody else seems to be willing to ask questions whatsoever. Because what she just showed was kind of blurry, I wanted to make sure to show it to you guys properly. You can see it right at the top there, but I will enlarge this screen to the most I can. You can see it right there, clear as day, exactly what she was talking about. July 18th, 10:08 a.m. And since it was submitted to Utah, I would assume that's Utah time, if that matters to you. And like she said, on hold, and she's 100% right. Couldn't be on hold for more than, I don't know, it's turning point. They want him there. The chapter wants him there. It's students who are requesting it. It's not even like Charlie and his team. It's the Turning Point chapter, which is made up of students. So I would think it, like she said, from that day, probably to the 20th, it gets cleared. Now, the thing about that is, why would that matter? Well, that matters because of the timeline. Now, I'm going to actually go through my timeline first. You know what? Let's go through my timeline first, because check this out. Right here. You can see it all right here. I've made this so big. Let me just bring this down a little bit. Just a little bit. So you see right here, July 13th, right? Candace actually corrected this. She said Tucker spoke on July 11th. Now, I don't know if I'm right or she's right. Maybe because I'm going off when it was posted on YouTube. Maybe she's going off of when it was actually announced. I'm not 100% sure, but I would guess that YouTube would have it posted. Turning Point would have it posted pretty soon after. So we'll go in between. I'll say, Dave Smith, July 12th, Tucker, July 13th, right? And this is when Charlie got major backlash, huge backlash for doing this. Now, Candace actually showed us, as soon as I just realized This, I'm like, oh, should I find her saying this? But it'd be too hard to find her right now saying this. But Candace actually said that when Tucker gave this speech, that he came off stage and there was a donor who right away got into Charlie's face and his face because of the things he was saying on stage. Couple that with the fact that the day before, Dave Smith is sitting there hammering Josh Hammer on everything. I mean, that back and forth, clearly Dave Smith won that. He's much more sharpened in debate. He pretty much only talks about the topic that they were covering, the whole Philadelphia thing. And Josh couldn't stand a chance. He couldn't. He resorted to personal attacks. Dave was just bringing up facts in regards to the government that he was criticizing. And, the crowd was actually responding to Dave really well, like a lot better than you'd think. Now, again, he got major backlash because of this. He pushed on. Obviously, he went ahead and said, you know what? Let me go to Utah. He went. He had that whole thing submitted. And now that was in the works. So around July 20th, this event was in the works. It had been approved, which means now they start planning things. So all of a sudden, this timeline makes way more sense. This is Baron talking about all the searches that happened. I know, way too close to the camera, but you have to understand, I have a Patreon now, so consider subscribing to the Patreon. As you know, sometimes we get attacked by bigger accounts and it puts this channel in jeopardy. On Patreon, I'll be able to talk about things that I can't talk about here, and you'll have more of a link to me just in case, because like I said, they're going to figure out this whole Philadelphia thing that I've been rolling with the past few weeks. And if they do, you'll find me over there. Link in the description.
To the computer to figure out who is the guy they just arrested. I don't know what this is. Maybe a few days later, people go, but look here, July 20th. Now, this July 20 is going to become very important tonight. The week of round July 20th is going to become exceedingly important. And the amount of coincidences that take place between like a week before and a week after July 20 and all that time in between becomes very difficult to disregard. After I did that, I thought, wonder if anybody Googled the hospital where they took Charlie Kirk. They took him to Timpanogos Regional Hospital. That's there in Utah. They have, I think, a campus in Orem, Utah. So I go District of Columbia. Here's where, again, on September 10th, 11th, right there, you see the searches for Timpanogos Regional Hospital, people looking for where they took Charlie Kirk. But you'll see this spike of interest in Timpanogos Regional Hospital out of D.C., and then no interest for 2 solid months before the shooting. But again, keep in mind that July 20 anchor date. Here we have a July 16, 2025.
Directly after the event, after the backlash is hit, so Charlie's getting the messages. All of a sudden, there is people looking into this whole thing. Now, because they asked for this on this date, doesn't mean that's when it was all set up. That just means that's when the chapter put in the request, right? So that means they had to have talked to Charlie, talked to Turning Point beforehand. Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear to you there. So this actually goes right along with his timeline. Now, I mean, it paints a very sinister picture. I'm going to go back to him in a second. It paints a very sinister picture that because Charlie decided to platform certain people, hold certain debates, and allow certain questions to be asked, it seemed like people were not only messaging him, like he said out loud on Megyn Kelly, people are messaging me, calling me a hater of, Philadelphia people. They're calling me a hater of all that. He said that it wasn't just messages, it was attacks, there was an intervention, all sorts of stuff. So let's keep going.
And then we have a July 3, and we have a June 28. And if you go out 12 months, you'll notice you even had one back then, and then this all kind of goes out. So something's going on here at the Timpanogos Regional Hospital search. And then right the day before the shooting, somebody in the District of Columbia says, We should really make sure we know what the Timpanogos Regional Hospital is. We really should make sure we know the day before he gets shot. So you had that July 20 anchor date, the time around there. You had a time way back. That could be anything. And then the day before, somebody zeroes in and says, we need to look up Timpanogos Regional Hospital. Maybe they're looking up an address. Maybe they're looking up, who knows? Who knows? But again, I'm just reporting the facts. I'm not drawing conclusions tonight. Because after Timpanogos Regional Hospital, I thought, I wonder who the medical examiner is in Utah. I wonder who the medical examiner is in Utah, because it appears to me, based on everything I've looked at, that Charlie Kirk may not have had an autopsy, which I find shocking. Shocking. Because an autopsy could give you a lot of things, such as what angle did the bullet come in? Where did the bullet go? What type of bullet was it? What damages were done to the organs? Were there any other injuries? And this is going to come up in a minute. Were there any other injuries anywhere else in the body? And so I wondered who the medical examiner was there in Utah. And I looked her up. She's a woman named Deidre Amaro. But Deidre Amaro, the medical examiner there in Utah, somebody with an IP address originating in
Philadelphia,
Israel, decided they were very interested in Deidre Amaro. And lest you think I didn't check, the reason I'm not showing you others, go to the District of Columbia, for example, not there. You can even go to Utah and see. Not there. So if it's not in the District of Columbia and it's not in Utah, this is not a very common search, is what I'm pointing out here. Not a very common search at all. So I thought, that's weird. So I press on. Now I go, a guy named Bo Mason. You guys ever heard of Bo Mason? Bo Mason is the commissioner of the Utah Department of Public Safety. In other words, a high-ranking law enforcement official there in Utah. Bo Mason. Now, I noticed Bo Mason got appointed to that position on July 17th. Again, that anchor right around July 20th. He was appointed a few weeks before that, and he took the role on July 17th, replacing a guy named Jess L. something, who resigned. I can't remember it all off the top of my head. But again, District of Columbia, Bo Mason. Now, you can say, hey, he's a law enforcement official. Notice how close that is to July 20th again. We got it right in that same window where I told you really watch that time period.
That's July 16th. For those of you that can't see it, it's a little blurry when it goes through so many hands. But Project Constitution, he just had this clip, so I had to make sure I went to his page for it.
Really watch that time period right around July 20th tonight. Something caused a lot of these searches to take place right in a very narrow band of time. But again, so this is the part that, he's kind of not filling in because maybe he hasn't looked into it. But this is, in my mind, the only thing that would prompt all these searches. It's the only thing. This and this scheduling are the only things that I can think of that would prompt all that. They knew the event was happening. They started looking into it to see what was going on. And then, like you remember, you had August 6th. He's talking with Megyn Kelly, and he's talking about how, it's crazy that he can't criticize certain governments, and he just doesn't understand it, and we should be able to question. And then he goes on with Ben Shapiro. That was like one of his last interviews. And it went out. It was posted on the 9th. It may have been filmed on the 7th or so, something like that. It's just that they're pretty quick with getting out videos. So I would think that's what happened. And in that video, Ben Shapiro is looking at Charlie like Charlie's like going rogue. He's basically saying, these people, certain, I don't know who he's talking about. He's saying certain people run the media. I don't know who he's talking about. Who's he talking about? Huh? I have no idea. I have no idea what he means. Okay. Not me. Not me. People from Philadelphia or whatever. I love how many people don't know the Philadelphia. They're like, what does Philly have to do with it? You got to ask somebody, man. I don't know.
But it's just very interesting. The way he did that interview is pretty wild. He said maybe we're not being told the truth about a certain government, and he wanted to be able to question that once again. And Ben didn't like the interview at all. Ben wasn't like, oh, I'm in front of a friend. Ben, the whole time, Ben's like, he's kind of looking at him weird the entire interview. Go check it out. And then within that time period, there is what Candace was calling the intervention, where the donors were pressing, where people were trying to get Charlie to refine his message on certain things. And it all just lines up. So that makes sense. So people were always wondering, and I was wondering too, I broke down the timeline and everything. I knew about all this pressure, but that is the missing piece. The fact that this request was put in right then and there. Because then it becomes like, how would they even know that there was going to be an event? How would they know? Well, the request was put in. And if the request was put in by the chapter, that means security, everybody, Charlie, scheduler, everybody had to know, okay, we have a potential Utah stop. It's tentative. We have to wait to get approved. Once we get approved, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very interesting stuff. Let's go on to the next clip. There was another clip of him talking about timelines. Let's jump over to this one.
To the District of Columbia. Anyone within our nation's capital curious about this guy? No. Anybody inside the state of Utah curious about this guy? Only after the shooting.
You can't see the name. It's Hunter Kozak. That is the gentleman who was asking him the question before. It was the last person that he ever debated with. Last person he ever spoke with, really. So sad, man. You have a wife and kids. That's the last person you talk to. But yeah, that's who he's talking about right now.
Shooting. But our friends on the other side of the world, for some reason, took an interest in this guy. Believe it or not, I'm not done. We've done George Zen. We've done Timpanogos Regional Hospital. We've done Deidre Amaro. We've done Bo Mason. We've done November 1098 Lima. We've done Matab Sayed. We've done Matab A. Sayed. We've done Robert Bowles. And we've done Hunter Kozak. All right. This one gets a little deep. This one took a little research. I was very curious when the Talking Points USA spokesperson came out and said they had spoken to the surgeon, but didn't give the surgeon's name. So I thought, who's the surgeon? Again, this is the surgeon who looked, according to the Talking Points USA spokesperson, who seems like a nice guy, not knocking him at all. Only doing his job, relaying the message that he was given from the surgeon, just letting the world know about it. Fine with it. This is the guy who said, hey, Charlie's made of steel. This bullet would have normally gone through almost anybody, but not Charlie, he's made of steel. But he didn't give the surgeon's name. And again, remember, Deidre Amora, they didn't do an autopsy, I don't think. At least that's the news on the street. They didn't do an autopsy. So I go and I get a list of all the surgeons I can find at the Orem branch of Timpanogos Regional Hospital. And I think, could anyone have looked up any of these people? The first surgeon I could find was a guy named Stephen Nealman. Stephen Nealman. Remember that date, July 20. This is July 18th. Stephen Nealman. July 18th, 2025. This was out of our friends on the other side of the planet over there. Very curious about the surgeons in Utah, you'll find out. I go to the next one I could find, Robert Patterson. I found a lot, so I added an MD to it. Robert Patterson, MD. July 23 and 24. This may have been the only one that was searched twice, 2 days in a row. July 23 and 24, Robert Patterson, MD. Again, I just find online a list of surgeons at Timpanogos. I eliminate people like the breast reconstruction surgeons because I didn't think that was necessary to look up. Actually, I might have looked up one of them. But I found the general surgeons, the emergency surgeons, all the people who minor surgery. I looked them all up. I go to the next one, Lee Trotter. Has anyone looked up Lee Trotter? Again, notice the date. Notice the date. This is right in that July 20 area, that July 20 timeline. Someone with an IP address originating in Israel.
Philadelphia.
Looking up Surgeon Lee Trotter. Near about that same July 20 time period. Are there other surgeons in the area? Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. There's a guy named Lee Patterson. So I look up Lee Patterson. Notice the date, July 19th. Somebody with an IP address originating in Israel.
Philadelphia.
In the week of July 20, that week on either side of July 20, was very interested in all the people who practiced surgery at Timpanogos Regional Hospital in Orem, Utah. There was a lot of interest from an IP address originating there. Now, let's just, we talked about the different, let's say someone's using a
So, it's very interesting stuff, right? Oh. I have one timeline. I thought all the things were towards one timeline. Listen. He's the one that posted it, okay? He's the one that posted it. It's fine. He has a good sense of humor. That's actually hilarious. Man. But all of that is very odd. And it all starts to make a little more sense when we start looking at this whole thing. This is when it was done. So now it makes sense. So much more sense. We saw that there was backlash, let's just say from the 10th to the 14th. Major backlash. August 6th, even more backlash. September 9th, even more backlash. And within that time, there's an intervention. There's pressure from donors. There's a group chat where Charlie says, I have to remove myself from this pro-Philadelphia cause. Now it all starts to make way more sense. How they were able to search for these things. Why they were searching so early in July. It's because by then, with what he was doing, he was already on the radar as being a problem. He was already a problem. And then when it gets to, Candace talking about the people that were around them and then their connects to, intel and whatnot, I mean, it all just makes sense. I mean, it's happened. I already released a video about it. It's happened so many times to big voices who are swaying the nation, who have the ability to sway nations, to sway votes, to really, make a difference. It always happens like this. And that's flew too close to the sun, as they say, But that is the part of the timeline that's missing. So just wanted to bring that to you guys. It's starting to make more and more sense. I'm out of here.